In our next unit, we're going to talk about quadratics. We defined what a quadratic was in Unit 6 when we were classifying polynomials. A quadratic is a polynomial in which the highest degree is 2, which means the exponent on your variable must be squared. So the standard form of a quadratic equation is going to be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. It's x squared here makes it a quadratic. A, b, and c are just going to be numbers. The next 6 words that we are going to find need to go in your Words Worth Knowing. So you need to get out your interactive notebooks, go to Words Worth Knowing, and define these next 6 words. The first one we're going to define is a parabola. A parabola is the U-shaped curve made from graphing a quadratic. So when we graph a quadratic equation, it's going to make a parabola. This is what a parabola looks like. On a parabola, we have several different parts that we can label. The first one is a vertex. The vertex is the highest or lowest point on the parabola. Your vertex either has a highest or a lowest point, because depending on if the parabola opens up or if it opens down. So if your parabola opens down, you have a highest point. If your parabola opens up, you have a lowest point. These red dots here are considered your vertex. When we have a vertex, we have either a maximum value or a minimum value. You cannot have both a maximum and a minimum. You have one or the other. The maximum value is the highest point on the parabola. So if my parabola opens down, I have a maximum value. It's that highest point on my parabola. If my parabola opens up, I have a minimum, which is the lowest point on the parabola. On a parabola, you also have what is called the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is an imaginary vertical line through the vertex that cuts the parabola in half. So if you look at my graph of my parabola below, you'll see I have drawn in a dotted line to represent my axis of symmetry. If you take your axis of symmetry and you fold your parabola on your axis of symmetry, they're the same on each side. Also, the last part of a parabola that we're going to talk about is our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. Your y-axis is your vertical axis, so the point where it crosses the y-axis is your y-intercept. So it's right here at the point 0, -3. Next, we're going to drag the correct terms, our vocab words, to label each graph. So the first graph we're going to look at, we're going to first label our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is where our graph crosses the y-axis. So our y-axis is our vertical axis, which is right here. I'm going to label the graph where it crosses, which is at this point down here, 0, -3. So that point's my y-intercept. This point right here is considered my vertex. It's my lowest point because my parabola opens up. Since it's my lowest point, that means it is also my minimum value. And finally, we're going to label our axis of symmetry. Our axis of symmetry is the vertical line that cuts our parabola in half. So this dotted line right here is our axis of symmetry. The next graph that we're going to look at, we're going to label our parts again. This graph, we're first going to start with our y-intercept. So I look at my y-axis, and where it crosses the y-axis is my y-intercept. So it's the point 0, +3 this time. Since my parabola opens down, I have my highest point. My highest point is my vertex, so my vertex is at the top. Also, since it opens down, that means I have a maximum. You can't have a minimum and a maximum. You have one or the other. And finally, I'm going to label my axis of symmetry. My axis of symmetry is my vertical line that cuts my parabola in half. Then one final graph. We are going to label our y-intercept again first. Your y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So it's going to be this point right here, 0, -3. My parabola opens up, so my vertex is my lowest point on my graph. And since it opens up, I also have a minimum value. And finally, my axis of symmetry is my vertical line that cuts my parabola in half.